A miter saw is one of those tools that really benefits from its own dedicated workstation in a woodworking shop. A miter saw station can raise the tool up to a comfortable working height. It provides surfaces alongside the saw for supporting longer workpieces when you're breaking down stock. And it can give you a place to store the shorter offcuts that you don't need for your project, but you also don't want to throw away. Well, in the August 2020 issue of Woodworker's Journal, I've designed a space-saving miter saw station with these sorts of features, plus a lot more. Let me show you around the project. Well, here it is. And if you've been looking at a lot of different miter saw station designs before choosing one to build, mine might be a departure from others you've seen. So I'd like to explain its features one by one. And the first one is overall length. Many miter saw stations are really long, but this one is just a little over 5 feet. Now, 8 feet or so of miter saw station works fine if you've got a lot of wall space. And the more miter saw station there is, the better you can support long workpieces when you're cross-cutting them, and you don't have to worry about the offcuts falling off the end. That's all great, but not all of us have a lot of wall space. And oftentimes I've found that I really only need a long support surface on one side of the saw and not on both sides. I tend to work with stock not much longer than about 8 feet. And generally, my offcuts are less than half the length of the board. So on this miter saw station, I'm apportioning the space differently. From the blade to the end of the station on the left-hand side, I've got a full 4 feet of work surface. And generally, I've found that this is long enough to support cross-cutting 8-foot long stock. To the right of the saw, I've got about 14.5 inches of support, which is fine for shorter offcuts. But when I'm cross-cutting something really long, my support will be coming from my drill press table instead. It's sturdy, and I can raise or lower it to the exact height of my miter saw table. This way, I can fit 2 power tools in the space that used to occupy just one, my miter saw with my old miter saw station. And I'm not sacrificing good workpiece support. So the drill press will do double duty. And when needed, the miter saw station can support long workpieces when I'm using the drill press. The support works both ways. Even though this station is shorter than others you may have seen, it still offers about 10 lineal feet of fixed shelf space for offcuts up to about 2 feet long or for other storage. So this could become your shop's entire scrap bin. Next to the saw, I'll be using these 2 drawers on full extension slides for storing shorter offcuts that are still too useful to throw away. Now what looks like a drawer to the right of the other 2 isn't actually a drawer at all. It's actually an open tray under the saw to catch sawdust. Now, most miter saw stations will have the saw sitting on a solid platform, and my last one did too. But the trouble with that is, any sawdust that doesn't get sucked away through the saw's dust collection system tends to fall down where it sits here on that platform underneath the saw. What I've done is take the platform away. The saw sits on 2 long support blocks instead. So any residual sawdust or tiny slivers of wood can fall down between the openings in the saw base and into the tray. Then I can just pull the tray out and either vacuum or dump out the debris. I think this is really going to help to keep the saw area cleaner. This chamber area and backboard behind the saw will also help contain sawdust that otherwise would have been blown behind the station. And the debris will fall down into the tray below. Now, this isn't going to contain all the sawdust, but I think it's a step in the right direction. You know how dusty miter saws can be, so I'm sure you'll want to connect your saw to a shop vacuum. Me too. And I'm doing that here with a length of Rockler's flex support hose with a couple of adapters connected to my saw and this Dust Right mountable coupler. My shop vacuum hose connects to the coupler when I need it for the miter saw station, but it disconnects just as easily when I need a shop vacuum for other cleanup tasks around the shop. And this IVAC receptacle automatically starts the shop vacuum every time I start the saw, then runs the vacuum for 5 seconds after the saw is shut off to clear the airway. It's very handy. And here's another big departure from other miter saw stations you might have seen. On my station, there's no long fence beside the saw. This no fence concept started in the maker-influencer community, and I think they've got it right. In order to make accurate cuts here, you don't need a fence down here. As long as your workpiece is making good contact within the saw fence area, you'll be correctly registered with the blade and cutting safely. I've actually found that it's a disadvantage with a long fence when you're working with rough sawn, crooked, or waney edge stock, because sometimes your workpiece will make contact with the fence down here instead of right here. And if it's not making good contact here, you're inviting a kickback situation. Now you might be wondering, without a long fence system, how do you clamp a stop block in place to cut parts to the same length? After all, a stop block system is a good thing and a real benefit to a miter saw station. Well, that's taken care of with this T-track embedded in my station's work surface and Rockler's corner stop that can be locked anywhere along the T-track's length. And if you don't have enough storage space down below, here's a full-size upper cabinet to help you out. And for some extra icing on the cake, I put a facing of galvanized steel on my door panels. That way, I've got a place to put my cut lists and other notes where they're right at eye level and not in my way. My miter saw gets a workout on nearly every project I build, and I bet yours does too. I think this compact, feature-rich miter saw station is going to help this essential power tool work even better. You can find step-by-step instructions for building it in the August 2020 issue of Woodworker's Journal, and additional drawings and plywood cutting diagrams at woodworkersjournal.com. I hope you enjoy building it, but even more importantly, using it. I'm Chris Marshall, and thanks for watching.